with Sovereign Harmony here on Sunday morning, Easter morning. If you are of the Christian variety, I grew up going to Catholic church, actually, Irish Catholic. A lot of serving Easter masses as an altar boy in my young days. Anyway, don't do that much anymore. But here we are, beautiful Sunday morning, Easter Sunday. If you have any kids, hopefully they found all their eggs, etc. But no one hid any eggs up here on the hill, so we're just going to talk about astrology instead. And we're going to talk about this week, which has really two major themes leading up to next Sunday's new moon in Taurus. Okay, we'll talk about next Sunday's new moon in Taurus next Sunday, but I want to talk about the build up to that. So we're coming off of, remember last week's full moon in Libra, and with it came a lot of like bringing up like old angsty wounds that come up in certain situations so that we can heal them. So this past week might have been a little testy for some of us, okay, and having to process things we thought we were finished with, etc. So this whole game of releasing the past is not, one and done, okay, by any means. And so we're just still in that process, essentially. And we still have one of the major themes that comes off of that full moon in Libra, because the ruler of Libra was Venus, that turned retrograde last week. Now retrograde is perfecting its conjunction to Saturn and its conjunction to the moon's north node, all in a little clump in late Pisces. That clump of Venus, Saturn, and the north node in Pisces is also forming an exact sextile to Uranus and Taurus. So there's a perfection of some of that energy from last week's full moon. And so what this little cluster of Venus, Saturn, and the north node really has to do with, again, is that recommitment to releasing the past, to open up the pathways for what is coming. And we're committing to our highest intentions. That's what Pisces has to do with. And it also has to do with the endings that are required for us to get there. So we're really digging in. And the only way we can really be aware that we're committing to saying goodbye to the past is having the past in our faces, right? And so that's really what this past week, heading into this week, has been about, is just us consciously closing the door on the past by having it be knocked on, right? And we can answer it, but we're shutting the door. And that act of shutting the door on the past is telling the universe we're done with this, okay? That we're done with this. And that's really where we need to be focusing, is that heart-centered commitment to release so that we can be on the highest path possible. And with that sextile to Uranus and Taurus, it's basically saying that we got to do something different. We can't just do things the same old way. So we really have to be open to any opportunity that takes us in a different direction, that solidifies our path in a different way. With Uranus and Taurus, can also have to do with our self-worth, okay? And so that could be money, etc. But the idea is that we're doing things differently in that realm, okay? The other major theme this week is the build-up to next week's new moon in Taurus, also ruled by Venus. And so like this whole Venus conjunction to Saturn, North Node, and sextile to Uranus comes up again with the new moon. But it's definitely a focus, one of the major themes of this week. But the other one is going to be this building T-square, okay? So that's when there's an opposition, and then there's a planet halfway between the opposition, squaring both ends of it. And so that new moon next week is going to be a T-square. It's going to be the sun and moon squaring Mars on one side, Pluto on the other, with that Mars-Pluto opposition. So what's building this week, today actually, we have Sun square Mars. So it's Sun in Taurus, just entered Taurus over the weekend, and it's squaring Mars in a Leo, okay? And later this week, around I think Wednesday, that is when the Sun is going to square Pluto in Aquarius, okay? Then at the very end of the week, that's when Mars in Leo opposes Pluto in Aquarius at the exact degree. And then that'll just be amplified by that new moon T-square that we'll talk about next week. But what is building there is something that's been building also for several months. Going back to early November, that was the first opposition of Mars to Pluto. That's back when Mars was in Cancer still, and Pluto was still in late Capricorn, just like a couple weeks before it moved into Aquarius for good. And so that was the start of it. Then right around the new year, 2025, Mars was retrograde in Leo, and it opposed Pluto in Aquarius, okay? So a couple of rounds of building, early November, early January, and now here we are with the resolution Okay, so it's coming into play, and this new moon in Taurus next Sunday is going to be kind of launching what we've been developing since early November. And this has a lot to do with courageous self-expression in a transforming world. Okay, so in other words, there are certain things that are appropriately expressed at the right time, the right timing for the world, the planet, etc. And so there's been a sense of this incubation where we've been working on our self-expression, and now it's time to courageously express in a way that now society is kind of transformed rapidly into being able to accept. Okay, so, and this goes back to the idea of the self-worth, right? And that's why that's going to come up in next week's new moon. But for now, we're feeling the energy build. So we went through this angsty period that we're still kind of going through, so we can, again, shut the door on that past. But now there's also simultaneously this building, kind of like a springboard almost, that we're going to, want to like spring forward with this, again, courageous self-expression. So we're clearing the path for that to be possible right now, and allowing it to grow at the same time. So anyway, we'll leave it there. If you are interested, this whole theme of endings and beginnings, I've been talking about Saturn and Neptune, the conjunction that they're going to be making at the 0 degrees Aries point in February of 2026, and how that's building now. It includes Uranus and Gemini and Pluto and Aquarius. It's a major shift in society, a societal evolution in a lot of ways. And I talked about this at the San Diego Astrological Society meeting back on April 11th. But I'm going to be doing that same talk as a webinar on April 23rd. That's this Wednesday, 7 p.m. Pacific. If you cannot make it, that's fine, because I will put it on YouTube. But if you want to attend live, ask questions, things like that, that's, again, this Wednesday, the 23rd. That will be at 7 p.m. Pacific. And I will post that YouTube, once it's on there, onto the event page. So I have an event page on Facebook. You can find that at Sovereign Harmony Astrology. And, at least click on the interested button. That way you'll get updates if I post things in there. And so I will post that YouTube in there if you cannot attend, you don't care about asking questions and things like that. But we're going to go over that. It's a lot of information, I'll admit, and it'll make you think. It'll make you see kind of the evolution of the last several decades, what's happened in the world, and what the possibilities are here as we cross this new threshold. It's going to be pretty different. And I talked about that. I emphasized that pretty strongly at that meeting, that we don't really know where we're headed, and in a lot of ways we're creating it as we go. That's part of that the Aries energy, right? We're creating it as we go. It's brand new, and it's 0 degrees Aries. So yeah, it's some big stuff happening here. So yeah, attend that if you want. If not, it will be on YouTube. But until then, we'll talk to you next week, next Sunday, for that new moon in Taurus, that intense T-square that's going to be highlighting the opposition between Mars and Pluto. Have a great Easter, and then we'll see you next time. Bye.